friends, मैं हूं आपका दोस्त मदन सिंह and I'm going to talk to you about the Indian Air Force. Now, the Indian Air Force is one of the largest in the world, and I've been part of the Air Force for almost 2 decades plus. I will say that in terms of professionalism, the Indian Air Force is perhaps one of the best in the world. But at the moment, it's like the dragon which can't breathe, can't throw fire because of limitations of the hardware which is available with the Indian Air Force. Now, if you remember, the Air Force was formed in 1933 on 6th October, and after that, various aircraft came into the Air Force, and till the early 60s, most of the aircraft were from the Royal Air Force. But at that time, in the early 60s, the Indians asked for the Lightning on the Phantom as part of the upgradation, but the British and the Americans refused. And that was the time India had to turn to the Soviet Union for help. And Nikita Khrushchev, who was the first secretary of the Communist Party, thought it was a damn good idea to make an entry into India, and he offered the MiG-21. I tell you, the MiG-21 was one of the finest fighters the world has seen, and it became the backbone of the Indian fleet for almost 60 years, and some of the squadrons are still in use, is still on the inventory of the Air Force, and the latest version which we have is the MiG-21 base. But over the years, the Congress government in particular neglected the armed forces, and the Air Force was also neglected, with the result that very few new aircraft were added to the Air Force fleet. And the net result is, I think, from the 80s, no aircraft became a part of the Air Force for nearly 30 years. The Air Force began to decay and get behind times. With the result, the operational stock squadrons started reducing. And India had supposed to have a sanctioned strength of 45 squadrons, and as far as I understand, only about 31 or 32 are operational at the moment. And these are not the best in the world. The Air Force at the moment does not have a 5th generation fighter, and most of the other air forces in the world, that include China, which has the J-35, and the Russians the Su-57, and the Americans have the F-35 and the F-22. Now, these planes are of the highest caliber, and the Indian aircraft industry is so antiquated, so old, that HAL, the Indian aircraft factory, has said that they'll be able to make their first 5th generation fighter by 2036. So I would take it with a pinch of salt. I'd feel very unhappy when I hear this news. It just shows that there's no sense of priority with HAL. They doesn't know, and we don't have the technical know-how. That's more important, to be able to make a plane. If you're going to make a 5th generation fighter in 2036, compared to China, which has one operational right now, you can well imagine the gap between the two air forces. And now the PAF has been offered the J-35. I'm told they're going to get 40 of these machines. And India only has the Rafale. Now, the Rafale is not a 5th generation fighter, and it is also not in the class of the F-35. So the question is, what is going to happen now? The Air Force Chief, a wonderful chap, he's gone on record and said that the last 8 years we've been giving orders and orders and no aircraft are coming. Even the Indian-made Tejas fighter is a total dud, It hasn't flown because the engine had been contracted from America, but the net result of that engine is it never came and the aircraft has been grounded. So that's the few. There are very few of the prototypes which are flying here and there, but the type of strength which was required of an aircraft in production and operation is not there. So how is India going to fill up these 14 squadrons, the backdrop? We don't make our own planes, we can't make them, we don't have the technology. And neither we have the courage to do something called reverse engineering, which the Chinese do. That also requires guts. And to do reverse engineering, also you need technical expertise. Tom, Dick and Harry can't do it, and Indians don't have that expertise also. So India is on the back foot as far as the Air Force is concerned, and nowadays air power is the primary complement to win a war. When you don't have that sort of an air power, I think India is handicapped. Pakistan will definitely now be getting the J-35 unless the Chinese start having second thoughts and don't give it to the Indians. Now, India had been offered the F-35, but as you know, there's been a little bit of a fiasco. One of the planes had to make a forced landing in Thiruvananthapuram, and it was perhaps on a secret mission or something to test the Indian defenses, but it came a cropper, it had to land, make a forced landing, and it's been abandoned there. The British and the French, including the Lockheed Company, are unable to take it off, and that's not a good advertisement for this plane as far as America is concerned. And America has offered this plane to India, that is, Donald Trump made an offer to give the F-35 to India, but no firm offer has come yet, and India is looking around for a plane. They need one desperately at the moment. But then it's a sad occurrence that India has to import this plane. There's nothing else you can do. You can't make your own plane because we don't have the technology. Then the second point which comes up is that no power can become a global power if it doesn't make its own machines, and its own aircraft, its own tanks, and its own bombers, which we don't make. And that is again a very sad occurrence. But now I think Narendra Modi is seized of the problem, and he was the man who brought in the Rafale immediately when he came. 36 of these machines came. They were direct import from France. But at that time, India had a chance that we could have gone in for the more advanced Eurofighter, or maybe even the Su-57. And now as far as getting the F-35 is concerned, it's a very good plane, as I told you, but one must really keep your fingers crossed whether they will give you all the software and everything else along with it, the technical know-how. Because the French, India contracted to buy the Rafale, but the net result is the French refused to give the source code. With the result, the plane is only half fit. You can't attach Indian rockets and missiles to this plane, because to do that you need the source code, and the French refused to give the source code. They say we spend millions of dollars on this aircraft, we can't give it the source code. The Russians are offered using the Su-57, but that's again not in the same class as the F-35. But they will give the source code. And probably the Su-35 is a little better than the J-35. That's the only thing, the plus point, but it's not a match to the American plane. So, gentlemen, the Air Force is in problems. And another problem is that we don't have a heavy bomber. Now, you need a heavy bomber at the first strike, and the missiles at the second strike. The Americans will never give the B-2 to India. Question doesn't arise. Or even the B-52. But the Russians have offered the Tu-160. This is a revised version of the Tu-22, the Mach 2 bomber, which can fly at 60,000 feet and has a range of 6,000 miles. So that could be enough to go and bomb even Beijing and come back. So I don't know whether the deal will flow further, or it will bear fruit or no. At the moment, India is at a limbo. We have an offer from the F-35, but we don't know. There's no firm offer. And again, the Russians have offered a Su-57, but they're going to take time. In the meanwhile, the Indian Air Force is greatly handicapped. I think who's responsible for this state of affairs? I don't know who's responsible for it. Maybe Pandit Nehru or anybody else. But Narendra Modi has been 11 years as the Prime Minister. I think he should have taken cognizance of this problem and augmented the strength from 31 to 45, considering the fact that India is now facing three enemies: China, Pakistan, and Bangladesh. Well, gentlemen, this is food for thought. I don't know how the solution is going to come around. I'll say goodbye and God bless. If you like my channel, please share it with your friends. Come back for more. And be a good boy. Jai Hind.